Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I'm Montel Williams, your host, and today we're diving into an extraordinarily compelling topic, hemp for veterans. Our guest today is not only a veteran, but a staunch cannabis advocate. Robert is the founder of Hemp for Victory. He's a dedicated advocate for veterans' rights with particular focus on using cannabis as a tool for healing. After serving honorably in the military, he noticed a significant gap in the care provided to veterans returning to civilian life, especially in terms of mental and physical health. This realization propelled him into the world of cannabis advocacy, where he's been a force for change, tirelessly working to dismantle the stigma surrounding cannabis use and promoting it as a natural and effective treatment option for veterans battling PTSD, chronic pain, and other post-service health issues. Robert Head, welcome to Let's Be Blunt with Montel, sir.
Thanks, Montel. I appreciate being here, man.
Absolutely, my friend. Thanks for having me here. Look, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your service in the Army, your college, after your enlistment. Talk to me a little bit. Tell me what's up. Where are you from?
Yes, I'm probably I bet you I relate with a lot of people. I am about 47 years old. So when 2001, when 9/11 happened, I had actually entered into the military just before that. I signed and raised my hand, and I was just waiting for my date. And when it happened, I remember my view changed on why I was going in, of course. Just like a whole bunch of other veterans, I went to infantry school. I went off to Iraq, spent 2 tours over there. I came back. I married my high school sweetheart. I went to Texas A&M, used the GI Bill 100%. I mean, I was, churning and burning and going and hit the floor running. But then I started drinking a lot more, and I was I was substituting pain, trying to sleep. I was substituting alcohol for sleeping pills. I didn't want to take pills because I had bad things. And my only really other tool was alcohol. And it just kind of started to deteriorate the life that I had tried to build for myself. And so I wind up asking a friend of mine about, hey, do you have any kind of solutions? They mentioned cannabis. And this is over a decade ago. And so at that point, I started using cannabis. I realized what kind of help it did for me. I created a farm up in Maine with a buddy of mine. We had that going for a few years. And then I really focused on activism. And I would go and I would speak and do testimonials at the Capitol and whatnot. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, a friend of mine who graduated from West Point, Todd Scatini, contacted me and said, hey, I want to do a function down in Dallas when West Point plays Air Force Academy. They're playing in Arlington, Texas, which is right next to Dallas. I said, yeah, sure, let's put something on. And so what we did was we created an event called Hemp for Victory, right? And that was an idea coming from the old World War II program that they had when they had people start growing hemp again because the Japanese cut off supplies for a lot of that fiber that was coming from Asia. And so they started this Hemp for Victory program where people started growing hemp for textiles and things of that nature. And we recreated it and said, hey, we'll have a Hemp for Victory party. And this party would be like a mixer for all these officers that went to West Point and the Air Force Academy to come here, meet each other, talk to each other about old times, and have discussion points about cannabis and how it's helping the veteran population. We had over 400 people show up. Generals, colonels, retired guys, non-retired guys, young guys that just got in that are having their first platoon, right? Remember those old days?
Mm-hmm.
And it said something that really spoke to us that, what we don't have in the cannabis industry and the activist aspect of it is that we don't have a collective voice of military leaders saying that this is something that needs to be done. And so from there, we really decided that what we would do is we would create a nonprofit called Hemp for Victory. And our focus is to have these these talks. We'll bring people who have knowledge, who know about the plant, who understand the plant and how it affects the body. And why is it that veterans are choosing it more so than the average in the general population? Why does this phenomenon happen? And we notice that as we have these conversations, leadership in industries like hospital industries, healthcare industries, other industries, they want to now have this conversation because it's their peers talking to them. Back
up for a second, because you kind of just brushed past it real fast. Let's talk a little bit about your time in service. Where did you go? Where were you stationed? Did you spend time in theater or what?
Yeah, I was in so Delta 219 in Sand Hill at Fort Benning, Georgia, is where I did my basic training. And my first unit was in Baumholder, Germany. I was in the first Armored Division, their second brigade, 1/6 Infantry. We deployed to Iraq in April of 2003, and we did an 18-month tour. And we were the first unit to get extended when we were there, and that was pretty big because a lot of us were there for a full year, and we were already in Europe. So many of us hadn't even seen our families in 2 years, and then they extended us. And so I can remember, after a long time away from family and friends and everything else, and in this rut, not really a rut, but a routine of constant grind, to get extended, it just felt like all was lost. I can remember the guys. I remember very specifically that I went out when we were told. All my buddies were all sitting next to where the Humvees were, and they were, like all of us sitting in around. They were passed around a Black and Mild, and they passed it over to me, and I said, "Hey, I don't want it unless it's weed." I was dead serious. I was as frustrated as everybody else was, and they handed it back over to me, and come to find we all were smoking a blunt right there, because it had gotten to the point where we felt like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm not going to make it back anyways. What are they going to do to me? Send me to Iraq? What's the worst they could possibly, that mentality, and that can eat at a unit. It can be very dangerous in you. So I do remember that aspect. My second unit was in Fort Hood, and I was in 166 Armored Regiment, and this was the time when they started taking infantry companies and putting them into mixed battalions, like with artillery and tankers and things of that nature. So that we were one of the first units in 4th ID in Fort Hood. I don't think it's called Fort Hood any longer. And then we went to Taji. I went back to Iraq. So I spent 2 tours in Iraq, and a total of 29 months.
Saw a lot of combat while you were there too?
Yeah, we did. It was always on the front lines. So, the way they did is you do these patrols on constantly. Sometimes you make contact. Sometimes you don't make contact. Sometimes that contact could be enemy fire, people just shooting at you. It could be a full-fledged firefight where you have to call somebody in. And sometimes it's an IED. But I tell people it's not like in the movies where they have action happening all the time. But what you don't see is that that's a lot of action that's happening in 2 hours of time, but they're there for 2 freaking years. So it's not all the time that something happens, but it's a weekly occurrence that something in the battalion is going to get hit. Yeah.
It's repetitive enough to just be repetitive, right?
Yeah, it's repetitive enough that complacency is going to kill you.
Gotcha. So when you got out, let's talk a little bit about that transition from being in and on active duty to becoming a civilian.
So when I got out, it was in 2007, and I think it felt like they were trying to get us ready to go. And they were just like, hey, they're telling us to do these little PowerPoint slides and bring everybody in. Hey, don't hit your wife, don't hit your kids, and don't be a dick. That was kind of the briefing that you got, and it was for like 30 days. And I remember you had to show up and you had to go through these like classes before they would give you your time home, before they let you go home. Then you had to get everything checked off and written down. Said, yes, I have completed. Don't watch your alcohol class and sexual abuse class and all this other stuff as you come home. And it felt like when I got home, I'm now getting berated. So you just sent me to 18 months combat to come home to get berated, and then send me home and come back for 30 days. And I think it was that they didn't know how to do it. It was new.
And do you think, let's talk about you for a second, digging into your own soul. I mean, did you feel like you had some of the symptoms of PTSD?
Looking back and knowing what I know now, yeah. Yeah.
And what would you say about, let's say, percentage-wise of the other guys that got out with you?
Oh, a percent of the guys that got out with me in my units? Oh, I would say if you were deployed, you've got 90% of them. Because we share a lot of stuff, right? It's when it happens to one, it doesn't just happen to one guy. No one just has one experience. Like if someone gets hit, there's other guys that are taking care of them, so it affects all of us, right? So some other guy may have a PTSD from getting hit himself, and maybe his buddy who didn't go on patrol that day is blaming himself.
Right.
You
Right.
see? And
Yep.
I think people don't, that's why I say, as I look back, knowing what I know now, after all the schooling and discussions with good people like you and other folks, I tend to look at it a little different.
And so when you did get back, I mean, did you immediately, you said you had already used cannabis before you went in. So when you got back, was your preference cannabis or was your preference coming back and alcohol and pills?
Alcohol and pills, because, and this is important to note, when I was using cannabis beforehand, I didn't know I was using it as a medicine.
Right.
I never knew cannabis was a medicine. I always knew it was a drug, right? Because that's what I was taught. So the only thing that I would use consistently was alcohol, and I knew that I could get that anywhere. So when I got out, cannabis and weed wasn't something I even thought that was something you could use. I never considered it a tool to cope and to help.
Initially.
No, initially, correct. And never occurred to me. For 10 years after, it never occurred to me.
Right. It's kind of crazy because, I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardmen, Marines coming home, when they come home, they go to the VA, and of course the VA says, no, 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 you can't use any cannabis whatsoever, even though we know that the VA has already allowed for people who live in states where there is cannabis that's legal. They can't take away your veterans' benefits while you're there. We know that. They don't even tell you that. They don't even kind of give you an idea about that. So what they do is they start feeding you the pills. And then once the pills start flowing, it's really hard to stop the pills because truthfully, we also all know that the pills were never meant to be a long-term fix. They were always meant to be a short-term fix, even when they were applied for FDA approval, short-term fix. But now you get home and now you go to see the VA doctor, they write you a prescription for 90 days. Then they write you another for another 90 days. Now you're half a year into something that you should have only used for a couple of weeks, right? So, even though you don't feel a real addiction, you are addicted. And then when you start combining the pills with the alcohol, that exacerbates that addiction. And it's just this continuous feedback loop where, you just want to get a little bit more alcohol, a little bit more pills. Next thing you know, you're taking 10 pills and drinking a half a fifth, then you're drinking 15 pills. I'll never forget, I did submarines for a while. And I literally, I was a special duty intelligence officer in the Navy. So I was, all of my missions, everything I did was TAD, temporary active, or not TAD, but temporary, was it TDY, how do you use it?
TDY?
Yeah, TDY. So I used to always do TDY. I mean, I would go, I did 3 full deployments on submarines. And, we did very, very special missions. And so when we pulled back into port, back then, Holy Loch, Scotland was still open. It's not open anymore, I don't think. I don't think we use that base anymore. But Scotland, what's it the home of? Scotch. Some of the best Scotch.
Good Scotch, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to be a submariner, back then on the East Coast, man, I'm telling you, you were a punk if you didn't drink a fifth yourself. If you knocked out a half a fifth or 3/4 of a fifth, everybody looked at you. If you just had 2 or 3 drinks, it was like, fuck you, don't even come near me. You know what I mean? But if you had a full bottle, you the man, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I used to get off a deployment, and my first deployment, we got off at Holy Loch, stayed in Dunedin for a couple nights. Then because of my job, I had to go down to London to MI5 or whatever they called it back then. I can't remember what it was, MI6. I can't remember what the name of the group was. And, I had to debrief down there. And I mean, that first day in Dunedin, man, I just remember walking off the boat. We used to stop at this really weird little fish and chips place. You grab your fish and chips and they gave it to you and basically wrapped up butcher paper. And then you went 2 blocks down the street, stopped at a bar, and it'd be like 9 of us. And everybody would order fifth of Jack, Glenlivet. Boom. Fifth, and, we're sitting around in a bar eating fish and chips, and you're drinking Glenlivet like it's glasses of water. And, it wasn't until my 3rd deployment, and I did 3 deployments like that, pretty much in about 2 years. I don't know, a little less than 2 years. So my deployments were like 90 days, hatch to hatch.
Hmm.
So they close the hatch, don't open again for 90 days. We come back, have a couple of weeks off, have a workup cert, back to sea again. Another 90 days. My second deployment was like 103 days. We even almost ran out of food. So then we come back again on the third deployment. Then again, I remember, I'll never forget, I came back from my third deployment and the Super Bowl was about to go down. And I got back maybe 2 days before the Super Bowl. And I remember, because again, I'm doing top secret shit that you can't talk to anybody about. So, it'd be the only person that I could hang out with was the other guys that were on the deployment or the other guys in that unit that understood that deployment. So then, you would go to your house and pull down the cone of silence. And you sit around in your living room talking top secret shit while your wife's upstairs in the kitchen. And I'll never forget, I had this one gentleman, one guy that I deployed with a lot. It was halftime, and we were going to get the second fifth.
Jeez.
And honestly, it caught me because I was like, did we just drink this? And we probably the bottle was open when I got it when we started the first one, so we knocked out 8/10 of a bottle. So I went and got the second bottle, and the game was over. And I'm looking at the bottle. I was like, this much left in the second bottle, and I remember distinctly looking at my friend and said, did we just drink all this? He said, yeah. I said, holy moly. And we left and of course we talked silly yin yang for a little while. Then he left. And I remember that night saying to myself, I'm done. I can't do this anymore because it's going to kill me. Because now I realized that I've been home for 5-6 days. No, I've been home for about 3 days. And I probably had already knocked out 3.5 fifths, including those 2 bottles right there. Those 3.5 fifths in 3 days. I'm like, what? What the hell is going on with me? So I literally said, I'm not drinking any more scotch ever again. And fortunately, I didn't have to do another submarine trip. I ended up being the guy. Basically, I got promoted to being the guy that ran the program. So I was sending other people to sea and not going to sea as much for myself. And that really made me start to check myself. But unfortunately, I didn't wake up and get smart enough to recognize what alcohol was doing to me and what I was trying to hide with my alcohol. For another 12, 13 years, man. I shifted over. I thought, well, just scotch was the bad thing. If I drink vodka and cognac, I'll be okay. So, of course, I shifted over and started drinking the vodka for a while. And I shifted over and started drinking cognac. When I got my show, I could afford the good shit. So, you know what I mean? I started drinking the good shit. Then if I'm really drinking 2 glasses of that a night, well, that must be okay. Well, and, but then, what was really weird is that I had always known there was something wrong with me, even throughout my entire active duty period. I had these really weird neurological symptoms. I should have been diagnosed with MS when I graduated from the Naval Academy, but the military, nobody could ever figure out what it was, so I was never really truly diagnosed. And I'll never forget when I transitioned off active duty into reserves and started my show. I literally pushed a glass away one day. And I had gone to a party the night before, and there were a couple of people hiding in the huddle in the bedroom smoking pot. And I was like, So I went in, took a little hit. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this from my high school days. And then I realized, you know what? Dang, this feels 10 times better than when I was getting ready to get that glass over there. So I'm not going to do that anymore. So I basically made a shift, man. I almost stopped drinking almost immediately. And, shifted over to cannabis, and I never really went back. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing because what we do notice is that for those veterans who shift to cannabis, their alcohol consumption goes down almost immediately. Is that what you started to notice?
Yeah, in fact, there's a lot of things very similar from your story and my story. I was taking alcohol as a way to sleep at night and a way to almost not only just get myself to sleep, but to get even for sexual activity. Sometimes I would drink alcohol because I needed to have something that took my mind off of whatever frustration throughout the day that's been built up. And I have kids, and I love being a dad. Like being a dad, I'm basically a stay-at-home dad for a long time while I was doing activist work, and I still am. That's the first thing that I do. My wife's wonderful. She does really well, and I've been able to be a stay-at-home dad with my family, which is a unique thing for an infantry guy to have to do, going from infantry to stay-at-home dad, right? but I loved doing it. But when I had drinking alcohol at the time, I was also having a full-time job, so I was frustrated. And my son wanted to sit down with me, and I was just mad. And he was like, all I wanted to do was sit with you. And I knew then, I was like, alcohol made my frustration with my child. All this kid wanted to do was sit with me. And I'm going to lose that opportunity, which is a small window. For those of us who have kids, we realize how small that window is. It's minute.
You blink and they're grown. Yep.
They're gone. And I knew that because all I've ever been told by people on their deathbed is family, 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 family. I never heard motherfuckers say, hey, I wish I had more money. And I kept that really into my heart, right? So that opened up, that had an epiphany. And in my mind, there was this brick wall. And it was completely, I could see through this wall, but there was a wall there nevertheless. And on the other side of this wall was this person that I wanted to be, this father I wanted to be, this husband I wanted to be, this man that I wanted to be. But I could not get there because I couldn't figure out how to get through this wall. As I started using cannabis, just like you said, my drinking damn near stopped. I went like to a 16th of what I drank. It's not that I didn't enjoy a drink. I did. I just only did it when I really wanted it. When I wanted it, not when I needed it.
Right.
What I needed was I needed to be able to calm myself. I needed to be able to think through my problems. I needed to not rush to judgment. I needed the pain to stop and the sleep to get better. And so I remember I had my I had a friend of mine send me these pills, little dark pills, RSO pills. I had no idea. I thought they were like fish oil, so I took 2 of them and give my daughter a bath. And at the time, my Bible study came over from our church. And I remember I got her out of the bath, getting her all cleaned up, taking her to her room. And all of a sudden I got this warm feeling all over me. I was like, holy shit, I'm high. And I'm, just got my little girl. So I go get her all cleaned up, put her to bed. And I go grab some apple or something like that to munch on and sit down. And everything's okay. I'm just listening to what people are saying. I got no opinion. Like I realized for the first time in my life, I don't need to have an opinion on this. Why do I need to have an opinion on this? Like I can just listen. And I started to really take in the moment. And I think that's something that people don't understand is that cannabis allows you to, with a good environment around you, right? You have to have a good environment around you, a loving environment. But it does allow you to break down the things that are causing your problems in life, to really analyze what these are.
Yeah, it's
find
that introspective piece of it, right? That makes you really look inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's important, especially for vets, because we've gone through a lot of trauma. And this is true for a lot of people in a lot of situations, right? Those who are in the fire department, the police department, emergency room nurses, people, single moms, for example. There's all types of trauma people go through, and they don't realize that they're trying to figure that out. And just sometimes that medication helps take away that frustration. I think alcohol builds it up.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. I think there's, we don't really look at alcohol the way we should, but, it's probably the angriest drug that we have in the marketplace that's not illegal. It's crazy. I mean,
yeah, and I've been to several cannabis festivals. I've never seen a fight, but I can go to a single NFL game and I can pick out 5 or 6 before I'll walk out of the park.
I'll tell you, I was at an event recently, and a big event, and it was an event it was a fundraiser for, an illness that a lot of people face, and it was really kind of crazy because I'm with a person who he and I were kind of ducking out the back door, hitting a vape pen every now and then, coming back in and finish the fundraiser, and the people inside were mostly pounding liquor. And this person that I was with literally suffers from the same malady that the fundraiser was about. And there was another guy that was there that was suffering from the same malady that he had. And yet this one was drinking and this one was smoking and this one was drinking, even in a fucking wheelchair. Got angry and wanted to get in a fight. It's like, dude, calm down. What the hell is wrong with you? And I've noticed that myself. But when did it become a pivotal thing in your mind that you thought, this is something I think I need to share with other veterans, and this is something I need to start talking about with other veterans so that they understand that there is some solace somewhere? When did you decide to become the advocate, to become the the person who was willing to step outside yourself and say, hey, look, you know what? I got an idea about something that we all should be thinking about.
Well, first off, you and I are one of those. There's the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the people, 100% will bitch about it. 80% of the people will bitch, and 20% will do the work, right?
Right.
I've always been a 20%, no matter what. When this started come about, I started to find an organization local to me, like a normal or something like that, and I found other vets that were using cannabis, and I found that different ways to use it. Right, vape pens. I didn't realize. I didn't know what a dab was. I had no idea. I was just always packed a bowl and roll a joint. Which, by the way, I still pack a bowl and roll a joint because I'm old school that way. It's part of my therapy, and I didn't realize it was therapy. So, as I reached out to organizations and groups that I was familiar with, that I had similar interests, that were also interested in cannabis. Partially so I could find a source because I needed a source, and second off because I wanted to find like-minded people. And then when I immediately started finding the like-minded people, I noticed that the industry, the cannabis industry, and the activist world is made up mostly of people who are viewed as either hippies or stoners and things of that nature. And the truth of the matter is, it's not. Most of these activists are mom and dads, and they're soccer mom. They're the like average people just like you and I, right? There is a part of this culture that is famous, and we all know about it. That's the dreadlocks and the pot leaves and everything else, and we love that. But what I found out over the past 7 years of doing this was that the information and the argument that was coming out was just blatantly being ignored. No matter how hard these activists work, I was like, why is it constantly being ignored? Why are you guys constantly shifting over just because you're uncomfortable talking to a person that looks a certain way? And that's, I saw problems within there that wasn't necessarily the cannabis industry's fault or the activists' fault. It was the history of how this has evolved, right? We've demonized this plant for so long that the generation of my mom and dad and your mom and dad, they're retiring right now. They're not in power, but they had a heavy influence on the children, you and I, in our generation, are all in power now. So you have about 50% of that generation that's not really for cannabis, and they're having to really, learn why. And they also come from a generation of, you don't flip flop. You stand you're standing on your own 2 feet, and your word is God. And well, you also grow and change over the years, and it's okay to say I thought one way and now I think a different. And I don't think that's something that our generation does very well at.
I agree with you, and I think one of the things that's really weird is that as we look back at cannabis, we went through a period of time where I don't know, how do I say it? We became a nation of stand in the line people. And what I mean by that is that the lines, if you walk down the street, there's an old joke that is a Russian joke, believe it or not, that a babushka, a grandmother's walking down in Red Square, and she drops her handkerchief. So she bends down to pick it up. When she bends down, picks it up, she turns around. She stops walking, bends down, pick it up. When she stands back up and turns around, she looks behind her. There's 50 people in line behind her. Why did they stand in line behind her? Because they thought she was standing in line. Well, that's how we are as a society also. In the last 30 years, we literally will just get and fall behind anybody that tells us to do something. We would just do it and wouldn't think for ourselves. And now we're in the opposite direction where we don't believe anything that anybody says, which is also stupid. So,
right.
We need to get back to a point where we recognize I was having a conversation the other night with a group of doctors, and I was trying to explain to them and said, right now, I believe, and they said, they're having a hard time as doctors. And I said, well, why do you think that is? And they couldn't really answer me. And I said, well, honestly, if you stop and you think about it, it's because for some dumbass reason, you guys have stopped talking about the virtue of medicine and being a doctor as a true fact of science. You've allowed people to nitpick and pick and choose what part of the science they believe themselves and they don't believe themselves. And let's get back to the beginning of this. I don't believe that anybody wakes up in the morning that's a doctor and says, I'm going to go to work today and take advantage of everybody who walks in my door. I don't believe that.
No.
I don't believe it's in a person who works for a pharmaceutical industry that gets up in the morning and says, let me go create a poison that I can shove down people's throats. I don't believe that. I believe there are people who are good intention, though sometimes their intentions may lead them astray. And they are so focused in on trying to, achieve a goal that they sometimes don't recognize that maybe the goal I'm trying to achieve, I shouldn't try to achieve chemically because it's not natural for humans. But I don't think that they are nefarious in their intent to poison people. I don't believe that. I really don't. So, when it comes to cannabis, I think what's happened is, for the last 50 years, the last close to 100 years, we've just been a nation of followers at a time when media was able to put out information and people started collecting it. They believed something, but they didn't believe something else. And when it came to cannabis, it's really kind of crazy how, an entire generation around the world was fed misinformation and decided to buy it and then hold on to it as if it was science, not recognizing that they had been nefariously led down the wrong path by people who had nefarious intent. And that intent was to take away something that was cheap, something that had already been visualized and understood for thousands of years as being good for you. They tried to vilify it so that they could start shoving bad. Now, those people, I think, had bad intent. You look at William Randolph Hearst, Charles DuPont, there was no question they had bad intent. You look at,
they wanted to stay in power.
Huh?
They wanted to stay in power by any means necessary.
Absolutely. And didn't care how they did it. So
one of our subject matter experts that we have, and we have a lot of subject matter experts over legal aspects, from doctors and lawyers and historians. And one of them is a historian of commodities, and I was talking to him. And what I was interested as we spoke, one of the things that we didn't realize is that we used hemp for all types of things, and textiles and ropes and sails and everything else.
Thousands of years.
In the 1930s, during this period of time, other things have been developed to also kind of replace. They could substitute hemp when trade didn't go very well and you couldn't get a lot of this stuff. So they didn't know that there was a difference between, and they didn't know how to tell the difference between this medical hemp and this industrial hemp. So we'll just get rid of all of it. That was the brilliant idea. And it was completely stupid to do so, because when they did that, not only did they take that organic medicine, go underground, which caused a lot of problems, all the problems they caused after this was from the DEA and everything else was man-made. All problems that you say are part of cannabis is all man-made.
Oh, look, let's back up. I mean, I know you talk to historians, but people don't understand that, again, for thousands of years before the 1937 Tax Act, and remember, it was called the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. It was not the Marijuana Illegal Drug Act. It wasn't the Marijuana Bad Drug Act. It was the Marijuana Tax Act. And why was it called that? Because they recognized that you could not tax for seeds that came across state lines. So if I lived in California and you got some of my seeds and you moved them to Arizona, I should have collected a little money on that, but I couldn't tell deliberately if that seed came from me or came from somebody else. So, they went after it. And then they, of course, tried to vilify a product that, if you look back at newspapers at the end of the century, 1887, 1890, 1895, go back to the classifieds, you'll see probably 100 different tinctures and 100 different remedies made from cannabis. We used to eat hemp everybody ate it. You ate hemp seeds. Why? Because it was
hemp seeds are protein.
It was right. One of the most protein-laden seeds on the planet. The entire Revolutionary Army was clothed in hemp uniforms. Washington grew hemp. All of our forefathers grew hemp. You
were made to. You had to.
Correct. You could even pay your taxes in hemp back at the turn of the century, in the 1700s. So, we really took something and just decided, let's just vilify it in a way that makes the majority think that this is some nefarious act being imposed upon us by brown people, and we should stay away from it. And then, of course, it just took off from there.
That's 100% what happened. And I want to lead on something that you mentioned earlier on. And it's pharmacologically. It's the pharmacological approach that the VA does with with veterans. Now, when you illegalized this drug that we knew was medicine, but we just didn't know really how well it could be used as medicine because we didn't have the technology back then to really advance, uh, by taking the medicine out and saying, hey, we can grow this better by going indoors and all this other stuff. We didn't know that then. But what was really unique is that as soon as we eliminated marijuana from access to people, all of a sudden the drug companies started to skyrocket. And now we are in a lifestyle of that the pill is the answer. And veterans who are they get out of the military at 27 years old, an average person, right? And now they got 3 or 4 more comorbidities that no other 27-year-olds having to deal with. And they have 3 pills a day they got to take. One of them just happens to suppress your sexual appetite a little bit. Not a big deal, huh? No, that's a big fucking deal to a 27-year-old man who just got out of the military, or a 27-year-old female that just got out of the military. And they don't realize that it's over a long period of time. So now this 27-year-old, for the next 20 years, he's taking all of his pills. They start little issues that they had to get more pills for. And now this guy is at 20 years out. He's on 15 pills a day. What are we doing? He switches to cannabis, and now he's down to 5 that he can manage. So when we see this on a consistent basis, to me, when I hear the politicians tell me that there's not enough evidence, they give me every excuse in the book. The bottom line is that this is a political tool that has been volleyed back and forth between the Republicans and Democrats for a very, very long time. And it is now affecting the health and welfare of not only your veteran population, but the rest of the population of the country. I know for a fact that people are realized outside of politics, the normal people like you and me, and people like ranchers and farmers who want to see a good community grow. They realize how important hemp is. So much so that Texas A&M, where I graduated from, has a hemp breeding group. They specialize in developing seeds for companies to create whatever product that they're wanting to create. One of those products is creating seeds that are bigger from the plant. They want to increase the size of the seeds so that it's for feed, right? In those seeds, which are fully developed, there's next to no real cannabinoids in there, but it's got a ton of protein and a lot of things that help reduce sickness in cattle. So
it has I think it's got like 7 or 8 different omega fatty acids. Yes.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the world outside of politics wants it, and it's starting to kind of close in onto DC and everybody else. We're winning that battle. 60-70% of the people agree it should be legalized. So
yeah, we're up. I think we're up now to 81% of people think it should be legalized for medical purposes, and 70% believe that it should be legalized. Period.
It is.
And we know that hemp itself has probably 2,500 different usages. People don't recognize that, but that many usages. And when you said earlier about the fact that politicians say, well, we need more research. There's been more research done on cannabis than has been done on any other drug in the marketplace in the history of mankind. So every single year, there's over 3,500 new peer-reviewed studies or documents that are put out about cannabis. So it's really kind of crazy. You decided, though, to again turn that self-awareness into an advocacy, and you started first. Talk to me about this whole idea about putting on a what do you want to call it, not a convention but a meeting after the Army Navy or the Army Air Force football game. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that came about.
So Todd Scatini is our co-founder, and he's a West Point graduate. Air Force Academy was going to play West Point in Arlington Stadium at we call it the Death Star, Jerry World.
Mm-hmm.
And then they moved it over to the new Ranger Stadium. And so the first year they had at the Ranger Stadium was going to be a big year, and we said, well, we'll do a mixer at Texas Live, which is the big facility next to the Ranger Stadium. And USAA put on a big show, and tons of people were there. And so we made some signs and said, hey, we'll be Hemp for Victory. We're up there at Troy Aikman's bar. Was the bar number 8.
Mm-hmm.
So we had people show up, and there must have been 300-400 people come by. And we had an old Jeep out there. And we were all talking to other leaders from the Navy, from the Department of the Army, from the Department of the Marine Corps and the Air Force, new leadership, old leadership. And when we bring up on cannabis and we talk about cannabis, they were curious. They want to know more about it, or they wanted to know, is it something that you guys are trying to legalize here? They had questions, and that's what we wanted. We wanted people to ask questions and find out, where is it that you're concerned with? And when we got through the end of the day, what we noticed was that there was a lot of officers and a lot of leadership that said that this is something that needs to change. I'm glad to see that there's prior leadership coming together to talk about this. And that's where we got the idea. We knew that what we needed, and on our board, in our board of advisors, we have Medal of Honor recipients, we have a Major General, we have Lieutenant Colonel Todd Scatini, we have a Major, we have all types of leadership in select specialties, whether they're an anesthesiologist or they have their own 501c3, some are business owners, and they come together. And when we talk and we go and we meet with people such as like the DFW hospital complex down here in Dallas, we were on a panel in front of the healthcare executives for Dallas. And so they did a cannabis panel. This is the first time they ever did it at Methodist Hospital. So it was a big deal in Texas, right? When I go there and I'm talking to them, they're not asking questions about, is it good for the children, or, how far do these places need to be from a school? None of that. You know what they were asking? Since you can't smoke it, how do you administer this medicine to somebody in the emergency room versus the ICU and everything else? And what kind of SOPs they have to change in order to get those done? Now, that's a good question. Because what they're doing is that they're trying to understand, how do I take this medicine and implicate it into my world? If you want me to approve this and you want me to be on board, then I need to know how this works in my world. And I think that's a fair question. So we try to bring subject matter experts to answer those questions. At the end of the event, what we realized was that there's not an organization, there's a collection of military leadership that is going to talk about cannabis and its relation to the veterans community. And when we do talk about it, what we do is we bring in subject matter experts who can talk to somebody in a manner that is constructive to their environment. And let me give you an example of this, and that this will help really understand what our focus is. We were asked to do a panel for the DFW Hospital Council and for the healthcare executives in the DFW area. And that's kind of an intimidating place to go to, because the DFW area is pretty much the size of Rhode Island, right? We got millions of people up here, and these are probably over 100 different hospitals that we're talking to. So on the panel was myself and two of my subject matter experts, one of my subject matter experts and one of my board members, Dr. Dorina Doshe, and Richard Chen, who's a legal advisor for hospitals. One of the things we were talking about was that they want to know policy and procedures and things of that nature. So when we talk about cannabis with these people, we're not talking to them about, how far these dispensaries should be from school. They don't give a shit about that. They don't care about, whether it's good for. They know all that information. But if you want the support of the hospital industry, of certain parts of the healthcare industry, then they need to know, how does this medicine fit into my SOPs of my current environment, right? So if I work in a hospital and people can't smoke in hospitals, how do we administer this? What are ways to do that? And do those ways fit into all the regulations that we currently have, right? You need to have somebody who can answer that question. We do. And when on that board, we have Dr. Rena Doshe. She was able to explain how this works. She explained how you can administer it, different ways of delivery systems for the body and cannabis. And what it does is it allows them to understand it well enough for them to support it. If you want them to support it, and this is their words, right? If you want me to support it, I need to know how this works in my environment, right? And it'll help me do that. And that's one of the reasons why we say education is so important. It's not just telling grandma how to use how to use cannabis or go to the dispensary. That's equally as important as having the nurses and doctors understanding how to use this as a medicine in the system that they work in 24 hours a day.
Gotcha. And just talk to me about what your future plans are with Hemp for Victory.
Well, right now we're doing some networking consolidation. We're figuring out got 2 new board members in. John Irvine, who is he was an ER nurse in the Army, and now he's a practitioner, develops training for medical students and also industrial hemp training. And so we got him on board. We have another one, Vincent Morales, who is part of the Veteran Community Project. He's part of our board member. So we're looking at hosting some educational events coming up, meeting top groups at the DoD, working alongside Balanced Veterans Network and other VSOs. We have American Legion that we're a part of, and it's a virtual American Legion, so any veteran can join it. And what we're doing with that is pushing the VA on research and for psychedelics and cannabis. And it's a long, hard road to get all those VSOs together and on board for that voice, and that's kind of what we're helping to do, pull all that together. Any events that we got coming up, we haven't planned any physical events. We just do a lot of discussions. A lot of our stuff is high-level talks that we try to get in front of, and try to tell people what we do through social media. So follow us on social media. Twitter.
If they wanted to do that, where would they go?
On Twitter, we're Official Hemp for Victory. And on Instagram, I believe we are also Official Hemp for Victory. So you'll be able to see it. You'll see our seal.
Okay.
There it is. This one right here.
Gotcha.
You'll see that. It says Hemp for Victory on it. And it just follows. And we always have information. I have a thing I do like a podcast, but it's called Cannabis Reality. I bring knowledgeable people on specific ideas. Like one time we talked about sex and cannabis, and it was a 3-part discussion. One time I did one about history. I've done PTSD, and I bring in subject matter experts. So it's outstanding to read.
Great. Now, do you plan on holding any national events? Will they be virtual, or are you planning on a location event, or what?
No, we don't have any national events right now that planned. I think a lot of what we do is we work with other groups. So we're not a member associated nonprofit. A lot of like VSOs are member associated, like American Legion or VFW or Balanced Veterans Network. We're a tool for them to use. So a lot of times when they have an organization that's doing something, they come to us and say, hey, can you become a part of this? Can you work into here? We create a panel. Can you create some educational formats for this? So it all depends on what we have coming up.
Does your organization, you have the website. That website, does it have educational information on it?
It does. If you go to www.hemp4victory.info, you'll find out you'll see videos up there. You'll see who are subject matter experts and links to their pages and other information.
Have you done any advocacy in DC trying to figure out how we can move this ball or needle forward to not just reschedule, but to legalize?
I did. I actually was up in DC recently at the 420 event. There was a national cannabis convention, and Balanced Veterans Network, and our organization put together bags and a lounge that we had there. We had about 400 or 500 veterans show up. One of the things that they did the day before that is they had about 9 visits that probably about 10 or 11 vets went to talk about cannabis and the descheduling and legalization. They had a lot of really good conversations. I don't know how much it's going to do as far as pushing the Safe Banking Act and aspects of that out. I don't know, but I will tell you, the more we do it, we're starting to see large VSOs come together over the topic of cannabis and psychedelics. And that right there is very, very powerful in DC because, Montel, vets, we can go, we're bipartisan. When I say a veteran, in the state of Texas, we got 1.8 million vets, and 5% of our counties are veterans. It's a snapshot of your county. We're everything, right? I mean, think about your basic training group, all them nut jobs back there. None of you guys looked alike. You weren't from the same places, right? And like I grew up middle class America, suburban America. My best friends were all from the hood, all of them, because the guys that I grew up with, they were just around me all the time. They were my family. So When I say veterans, it's everybody. In DC, we're able to talk to both sides equally. We don't get a lot of doors shut in our face.
That's great.
So it's coming together.
Are there any specific initiatives that you guys, research initiatives or other initiatives that Hemp for Victory is working on right now and you want some support?
We are starting to work on some letters that we're going to send out to the veterans committees in both the House and the Senate. So if you have an organization that doesn't even do anything with cannabis, but is veteran related, get a hold of me. My name, you can get my email is robert@bluecordfarms.com. Or you can contact me through Twitter or Instagram. You can DM us. That would be very important. The more VSOs that we have say, hey, you know what? We support cannabis. That's not what we do, but I just want to let you know we support it. That's what we want. We know that you support it. We can put you on a list of support so that when we contact these groups, what we're doing is we're coming to them and saying, hey, look at this list. Look at this list. This list is your constituents. Right. And they're saying this list represents 8 million veterans or 10 million veterans. And in order to do that, we got to have all the big VSOs on and all the small VSOs to come together to speak up. And so if anything, I would say that's going to be one of the biggest things. If you're VSO, small or large, contact me. Let me know your support and I'll get your contact details.
Cool. And what's one of the biggest challenges Hemp for Victory is facing right now in its mission? And how can, all the cannabis advocates out there help you tackle it?
Well, one of the things obviously is fundraising, right? Fundraising is always the biggest thing, but a group like ours is not necessarily a large group. We don't have a lot of assets, so it doesn't take a lot for us to be able to run. Some of these groups takes, $1 million, $3 million to run these large organizations. Ours doesn't take a lot of that, but fundraising is always a big thing. So we look for corporate sponsors that can stay with us. We're a nonprofit, so it's a 501c3. It's a write-off at the end of the year. We look for corporate sponsors that can help us in large donations. And it helps with flights. It helps with getting us out to where we need to go. We give challenge coins when we visit people. So these are things that we want to be able to do. In order to do that, we're always dipping into our own disability.
Sure. It needs money to spread the word. I'm telling you now. Anything else you want to add, my friend?
That's it. I would tell everybody this. If you're a vet out there and you're struggling and you think cannabis might be a good option for you, I definitely think you should reach out to organizations like myself or Montel and find that answer. But do your best to be kind and live a good life. You've earned it, right? Absolutely. You've earned it. Don't take on the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Be kind to yourself. Absolutely.
Be kind to yourself. That's right.
So, well, to our listeners out there, I want them to remember that Hemp for Victory and needs your donations. They need your support. So please go up on the website and see what you can do to help and consider how, much support you could literally give. So, spread the word. We've only just skimmed the surface today, but every bit of the support counts. So don't forget to tune in to all of our next couple upcoming episodes. And I'm going to continue to talk about Hemp for Victory on here as much as I can to see if I can drive some folks your way. Okay, my friend?
I appreciate it, brother. You have a good one.
Absolutely. You take care of yourself. Stay well. Love that family of yours. Keep doing what you're doing. And for all of you, until next time, stay safe, stay informed. Let's all be blunt about what we are working on. Let's get this done. Follow us on your social media for updates and more. And thanks again. Keep tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.